All right, so today we're going to dive into a really cool, simple story that, believe it or not, explains how an entire economy gets built from the ground up and, why it sometimes comes crashing down. And it all kicks off with something, well, pretty unexpected.
I know it sounds a little crazy, but yeah, the entire super complex world of savings, capital, even massive market crashes, we can actually understand it all just by talking about fish.
So, what we're going to do is zoom in on this tiny fictional island. And by seeing how their little economy works, you'll start to see these huge economic forces that are shaping our own world every single day.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, part 1, the birth of an economy. Imagine this really simple island. The economy here is, well, it's about as basic as you can get. Your entire day is catch a fish, eat that fish. That's it. Repeat tomorrow.
So on this island, we've got 3 guys, Abel, Baker, and Charlie. And like I said, they survive by catching just 1 fish a day, each with their bare hands. But Abel has this big idea, a truly revolutionary idea. He's thinking, what if I could build some kind of tool, a piece of what we call capital, that would help me catch fish way more efficiently? And folks, this is the moment where absolutely everything changes.
So, for Abel to make this idea a reality, he needs 2 crucial things. First up, sacrifice. He has to actually decide to go hungry for a whole day so he has the time to build this net. In economics, they call this deferred consumption, basically putting off eating today for a better tomorrow. And second, he has to take a huge risk. I mean, what if the net doesn't work? He's just wasted a ton of time and energy, and he's still hungry. But lucky for him, the risk pays off. He builds the net, and bam, just like that, his productivity doubles.
So check this out. Abel goes from catching 1 fish a day to catching 2, but he still only needs 1 to eat, right? So that leaves him with an extra fish, a surplus. And this one little fish, this is the island's very first savings. It might not look like much, but it's the tiny seed from which this entire, complex economy is about to grow.
All right, part 2, money, banks, and government. Now that savings actually exist on the island, things can start getting a lot more interesting. Abel's extra fish can be put to work, and that's how you get the beginnings of a real financial system.
Okay, so Abel has this extra fish, and now he's got a choice to make. He can lend it to Baker and Charlie. Now, if he makes a productive loan, they use that fish as food for the day while they build their own nets. What does that do? It makes the whole island richer, more total fish being caught. But he could also make a consumption loan. They just eat the fish and take a vacation day. That creates absolutely no new value. And you can see how this difference is completely critical for whether an economy grows or just stagnates.
So let's say they go the productive route. Soon enough, everyone has a net, and the island is just swimming in surplus fish. This is huge because it frees people up. Not everyone has to spend their entire day fishing anymore. This leads to what's called a division of labor. Maybe Charlie discovers he's an amazing hut builder, and Baker starts designing cool new clothes. But then the barter system gets really clunky, right? Like, how many shirts is 1 hut worth? So they need something better. They all agree on a medium of exchange. And what's the one thing that's durable and everyone values? Fish. Just like that, fish become the island's official money.
So now we're in part 3, the unbacked paper fish. The island's economy is booming, and it's all built on a solid foundation of real work and real savings. But a new invention is about to show up and completely change the very definition of money. And here he comes, a politician named Frankie Deep. He shows up and makes this promise that sounds almost too good to be true. I'm going to give you all more government benefits, but I promise I won't raise your taxes. So how does he pull this off? Simple. He starts printing paper notes. Let's call them fish reserve notes, which at first are actually backed by real fish sitting in a bank.
But here's the catch. To pay for all his popular new programs, Frankie's government just prints more paper notes, and then more. Pretty soon, there are way more notes floating around than there are actual fish in the vault to back them up. And just like that, the critical link between the paper money and its real value, it's been broken.
Now, to kind of hide what they're doing, the government comes up with this clever trick. They invent the official fish. What they do is they literally take real fish, slice them up, and then glue the pieces back together to create more,
but smaller fish. So now each paper note is still technically redeemable for one fish, but that official fish just keeps getting smaller and smaller over time. This is such a great, simple way to understand inflation, isn't it? Your money is still called a dollar, or in this case, a fish note, but it buys you less and less real stuff.
Okay, part 4, the Great Hut Bubble. So what happens when you take a system that's just flooded with cheap, easy-to-print money and you combine that with a really popular political goal? Well, you get a massive, totally unsustainable economic bubble.
The politicians get up and they declare, "A hut for every citizen." It's a great slogan, right? To make it happen, they create these government-backed agencies to guarantee hut loans. This basically tells the banks, hey, lend out as much as you want for housing, don't worry, we've got your back.
And then, to really pour gasoline on the fire, the government drops the required down payment for a hut loan all the way down to 0%. 0%. Think about that. With no skin in the game, the buyers have zero risk. If hut prices go up, they make a fortune. If prices fall, they can just walk away from the loan. This isn't about finding a home anymore. It becomes a frenzy of pure speculation.
And the result? It's exactly what you'd expect. With the government guaranteeing everything and credit being basically free, how prices just explode. They go through the roof. They become completely detached from any kind of real underlying value. For a while, everyone feels incredibly rich, but their wealth isn't real. It's just built on this shaky foundation of debt and printed paper, not on actual savings or production.
But here's the thing about a boom that's built on debt instead of real production. It can't last forever. It just can't. So the big question is, what happens when reality finally bites back and this massive bubble inevitably bursts?
Well, you might think they'd learn their lesson, but no. The government's solution is to double down on the exact same policy that caused the crisis in the first place. They invent something called quantitative fish vouchers, which is a hilarious but perfect parallel to quantitative easing, and they just flood the system with even more paper, desperately trying to prop up those falling hut prices.
Okay, so this brings us to the end. Part 5, an economy's final crash. Because here's a fundamental truth. You cannot solve a problem of too much debt by creating even more debt. And so, our little story now reaches its logical and really tragic conclusion.
And the final collapse, it happens incredibly fast. First, the Zongdao Empire. That's a neighboring island that's been selling real stuff to Macedonia in exchange for their paper notes. They finally wise up. They realize the paper is worthless and they stop accepting it. Confidence just evaporates. Overnight, the fish reserve notes become completely valueless. With no real goods being produced on the island and no way to import them, the stores are suddenly empty. And then, the final blow, foreign creditors who hold all the island's debt. They show up and use that now worthless paper to buy up all the island's real assets, the land, the businesses, the infrastructure, for, pennies on the dollar.
And that's the story. It's pretty powerful, right? It all started with just one person, making a real sacrifice to create real capital. That led to real savings, and then to real sustainable growth. But it all ended with an economy built on nothing but paper promises, which led straight to a bubble, and then a truly devastating crash. And so the book leaves us all with a really critical question to think about. Is our own economy built on the solid foundation of real fish, or are we just busy shuffling around increasingly worthless pieces of paper?